That's right. Hamas says it's one of its people as well. It was also done in coordination, Yvonne, with another militant group, Palestinian Islamic Jihad. They said the bomber was sent by them. The bomb appears to have gone off early. It was being carried in the man's backpack. They're not sure of the target, although there's some speculation it could have been a nearby synagogue. An interesting thing is that Hamas is saying that these types of attacks will continue while Israel's bombing campaign and ground offensive inside Gaza continues.
And Eric, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken says it's a decisive moment in Gaza, in the Gaza ceasefire talks, but Hamas has to date rejected the deal. What are the prospects now for an agreement to be reached as Secretary Blinken visits the region?
Yes, they don't look that good, not just because of Hamas. Hamas had said before the talks that it was very sceptical about the prospects for a deal, saying Israel has been adding new conditions to a deal it already agreed to and that the US had put forward in early July. So Hamas said, even before the latest round of talks commenced, that it feared Israel was trying to stall the negotiations while it continues its military operations, because Israel hasn't achieved some of its key military objectives inside Gaza. And now Hamas says the briefing it received from the mediators confirmed its fears. It says that that the US has accepted Israel's new conditions and made them part of the bridging proposal. These are things Hamas has always said it wouldn't accept, like, continuing Israeli military presence inside Gaza. Israel also wants to control an area in the middle of Gaza to prevent militants from moving from the south to the north. This area is known as the Netzarim corridor. Israel's also, or Benjamin Netanyahu specifically, is insisting on maintaining Israeli control of the border between Gaza and Egypt, and likely the Rafah border crossing with Egypt, which is a key site. And the third thing that Hamas has always viewed as a red line is the fact that the ceasefire needs to be permanent. There needs to be a pathway to a permanent ceasefire. And Israel, just before we're speaking now, the Israeli Prime Minister has said that Israel wants the right to resume attacks against Hamas. So again, another deal breaker for Hamas. So with those conditions, part of the deal, Hamas was never going to agree. It actually said this was going to happen. And Israel has actually confirmed, the Prime Minister said that there were always things Israel was never going to agree to either. So it looked like the US tried to take control of the narrative and push the two sides towards a deal, but they're both saying publicly that's not likely now.
Meanwhile, what are Iran and Hezbollah saying?
Well, that's the other element in all of this, is that Iran said it was holding off attacking Israel in retaliation for Israel's presumed assassination of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran. But it was doing so on the proviso that the ceasefire talks were progressing. It said it didn't want to jeopardise the chances of a ceasefire in Gaza. Iran has always sort of differentiated between the two things. It says on the one hand it has the right to retaliate. There was an attack in a government building in its capital. But on the other hand, it says it really doesn't want to ruin things for the people in Gaza. So it's now saying that it could still attack, but it wants to see progress on these talks. If the talks collapse, it puts major strikes by Iran back on the table, and also by the Lebanese militant group you mentioned, Hezbollah. Hezbollah has tried to say we might attack separately to Iran, we might attack in coordination with Iran, and that's because Israel killed a senior Hezbollah military commander in Beirut just hours before it killed Ismail Haniyeh, well, presumably killed Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran. So these things are still potential risks for Israel and the region, and that's been the fear, that if these attacks come back on the table, then the region will inch closer to an all-out war that involves not just Israel and Hamas in Gaza, but Hezbollah in Lebanon and Iran and its allies around the Middle East.
Eric Tlozek, thanks for that update.